Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, as promised, we're doing the Juan Soto show. Should the Phillies go after Juan Soto in free agency this year? And how should they go about it if the answer is yes? And the answer is yes. And much more on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been over at 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio for 5 years now. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons. And this is my 3rd season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing wherever you consume podcasts. Leave that rating and reviewing if you like the show, or if you don't, we got stuff to work on, let us know too. But I know you love Locked On Phillies. And if you're watching on YouTube, or if you want to check out on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. That would be very, very helpful to us here on Locked On Phillies and get you notifications when new episodes are posted. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the season going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Perfect, right? Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, obviously, there's one marquee free agent this year, and it is none other than Juan Soto. Now, Soto spent his last season up there in New York, played in the World Series for the New York Yankees just a couple days ago. He is a monster. He is just unbelievable. I can't overestimate how much every team in baseball should be in on Shohei Ohtani. Even if you can't possibly compete with the numbers that major market teams are putting up, if you are a team owner in baseball, you should be checking your couch cushions to put together some type of competitive offer to Juan Soto, or put a non-competitive offer and just try, because he is that special and at that point in his career, and just you need to do this, right? This guy is what Bryce Harper was when he became a free agent, maybe even more so. Maybe even it might feel blasphemous to say this guy's better than Bryce Harper, a better potential free agent than Harper, considering Harper did everything you could have ever asked him to do coming to Philadelphia. But at 26 years old, and just barely 26 years old, he turned 26 on October 25th. He's unfreaking believable. Listen to some of these numbers. Just this past year in 2024, he had a 7.9 WAR. He played a solid right field, not like a plus right field, but a solid right field. Batted .288, 41 home runs. Now, I know people might say, oh, Yankee Stadium. I don't care. Put him anywhere. Put him at Coors Field. Put him at out there in San Francisco with one of those big parks that's impossible to hit the ball out of, where Barry Bonds used to make it look easy. Put him at Yankee Stadium, put it in that Citizens Bank Park. He's going to go yard a bunch. Listen to some of these numbers in his career as far as home run totals are concerned. He's already hit 201 home runs in his major league career. 41 last year, 35 and 23. 2022, the total amount, 27 between 2 teams. 29 in his final year in Washington. 13, a down year before that in 2020, and that's a down year even with the shortened season. 34 in 2019, 22 in 2018. It's crazy. RBIs, 109 this past year, 109 the year before. He led the league and the majors in walks in 2023 with 132. He had 129 last year. He barely only struck out over 100 times, 119 strikeout. What do you want me to say about Juan Soto? He's an unbelievable bat. He just puts together the greatest at bats. He is such a darn good left-handed hitter. And I just don't understand how any team wouldn't want Juan Soto. So why should the Philadelphia Phillies absolutely go after Juan Soto? Because why wouldn't you? I've never understood this, right? You bring up sometimes in other sports where there's contract lengths that are shorter. Like you don't see people often in the NFL unless you're Patrick Mahomes getting like a double-digit years amount on the contract. You don't see that very often. Every once in a while, you'll see it in hockey. Rarely you'll see it in the NFL. Basketball, you don't see it because of their contract structure. Baseball, you see it for these big time guys. And you might say, oh, well, the thing I always hear is if you give them an offer that is lower significantly than the value that he's looking to get and that other teams will give him, well, then when he becomes available again, he may not be interested in your organization if you give what he believes to be a disrespectful offer. Well, guess what, guys? Juan Soto's contract, whatever he gets, is going to be a decade plus. Some people are estimating as many as 14 years on this new contract. And also, he wants to get to the $700 million mark. So that's pretty darn expensive. But if he signs like a 14-year, $700 million contract and you offered him something less, you don't have to worry about him not coming to your organization because of the offer. He's not going to come to the organization because he's not going to be available for basically the rest of his career. Just like Bryce Harper. When you see what he is to this franchise here in Philadelphia, why would you ever let him out of the building? That's what Soto's going to be for whatever team gets lucky enough for him to choose them. And I know some teams don't have the financial means, but again, check your couch cushions. The good news is the Philadelphia Phillies, they do have the financial means. John Middleton said payroll, we're expecting it to be higher in 2025. We're not opposed to going out and making big moves in free agency or a big move in free agency. Translation, we'll look at the Soto situation. A lot of people don't think he's going to make it out of New York. But that's even more of a reason why the Philadelphia Phillies should absolutely go after Juan Soto. You don't need me to tell you how good of a player he is. He's a near perfect baseball player. He's not like the greatest fielder out there in right field. But who cares? Honestly, who cares? When you swing the bat the way that Juan Soto does, you don't have to worry about that. I will tell you right now, if the Philadelphia Phillies add Juan Soto this offseason, you are essentially paying for a World Series championship. You are. That's what I believe. There's only one team that could conceivably stop you, and it would require the Dodgers to have the year that they got from Shohei Ohtani over again, and he'd need to pitch like a Cy Young candidate, and all the other players on the team are going to have to be just as good, or they're going to have to add significantly. If the Phillies get Juan Soto, call it wraps, right? I'm just telling you that right now, and that's why you go do it, because if you really want your trophy back, John Middleton, you put this guy in red pinstripes. Now, if they don't get Juan Soto, am I going to rip the Phillies organization? No, because I know that when you start to get up into that $700 million range, which sounds insane, that player has a lot of pull. He's going to, now reports are, right, that Juan Soto is going to go where the money goes. So we'll see, and we're going to talk about coming up next. Is it a realistic goal to pursue Juan Soto? Our final segment today, by the way, we're going to do a quick Zack Wheeler evaluation of his 2024. There's not that much to look into there because he was so darn good. That would be the same thing we'd be saying about Juan Soto, too, if we were evaluating him, by the way. But you don't really need to convince me of him as a baseball player. And I shouldn't really need to convince you of him as a baseball player. He's about as foolproof of an investment as you can make in baseball right now. Maybe the most foolproof investment. It would be like if in football, Patrick Mahomes was available, if in basketball, Luka Doncic or Anthony Edwards was available, if in hockey, what if, I don't know, let's say Connor McDavid, even though he's a little bit older, was available. It's one of the great players in the sport right now. You could sign for the rest of his career, basically. Yeah, the Phillies should absolutely go after him. And there's one other little bit of why. One, if he stays in New York with the Yankees, well, that means you have a contender in the American League that gets to stay together for another year and build on that. You don't want to see that happen with Judge and Soto. That'll make it a little bit more difficult. But the thing you really want to block from happening, this team has been rumored since we knew that Juan Soto was probably going to hit free agency and probably not get a deal done in-house with the Yankees. If he goes to the darn New York Mets, if Juan Soto ends up wearing orange and blue for the next 14 years, he is going to be a headache for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, it very well could be, and all due respect to the Mets, they're a much better team than this organization. But Juan Soto was with Washington for a couple years before he first struck out and started, not struck out really, but first started bouncing around the major leagues. Remember, he went to San Diego and then now with New York, but he was with Washington for 5 years there, or 4 and change, and he didn't really do too much to kill the Phillies. He was very good, and he was good against the Phillies, but the Phillies had success at points in that stretch against the Washington Nationals. But, man, the Mets are a better team, and it's not that you can't survive that, but you don't want to see that happen. So go out there and make a competitive offer and court this guy and fit him in to left field or right field and move Castellanos to left and fill out your team. Like, that is absolutely what the Philadelphia Phillies should do. And if the Phillies don't make a competitive offer to Juan Soto, like if they don't get him, they don't get him. If he chooses to go to the Mets, if he chooses to stay with the Yankees, he wants to be in New York, if he chooses another organization for valid reason, or the dollar amount is something exorbitant, like someone offers him $800 million and he chooses to go, like, there's a limit for everybody at some point. I understand that. But if it comes out that, like, the Mets offered $700 and the Yankees offered $700 and the Dodgers offered $700, and I don't expect the Dodgers to, and the Phillies offered like $500, I'm going to be like, all right, really? I would have expected more competitive from you. So those are my thoughts on the Juan Soto situation and why the Phillies should absolutely go after him in free agency. There's no doubt in my mind. But now we've got to talk about the next part of this equation. Is it a realistic goal for the Philadelphia Phillies to go get him? A lot of people believe it's not realistic. I'll tell you why I think it is coming up as we continue today's episode. Let's talk about FanDuel first, though. You get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. It's a great time of year for it. Even though baseball's done, you got football, basketball, hockey, and college football all rolling at the same time. So many things to bet on, and you're at the point in the football season, the NFL season, where you should know a little bit more about these teams and have a good feel for who's what. And Vegas may not. Or you might see some things that people haven't accounted for when they're making these lines. Bottom line is there's opportunity out there, and FanDuel is the best place to take advantage of it. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So is the Soto situation realistic? Like, what are the chances that he ends up in red pinstripes, and what are the things that stand in the Philadelphia Phillies way? Because I did as much as I could in the last 11 minutes of this podcast to tell you why anyone who doesn't think, like if I was to poll the Philadelphia Phillies fan base and say, should the Phillies pursue Juan Soto in free agency? It should be 100%. And if it's not, everyone who's not a yes on that poll should listen to the first 10 minutes of this podcast and then vote again, and then listen and then vote again, because there's no reason the Phillies should not go after Juan Soto with a competitive offer and do everything they can to sign him. He's at a position of need. He is 26. He is a superstar. He would almost guarantee this team a World Series, like as close as you can get of any signing of anybody, probably for the next decade. So that's that. Now, is it a realistic goal? Because, listen, I would have loved the Phillies to go get Shohei Ohtani. That was never really talked about as something last offseason when he ended up signing with the Dodgers that was realistic. It didn't really seem like the Phillies had an inside track to get Ohtani. They could make a competitive offer, but if he doesn't want to come here, he doesn't want to come here. And he would have had the DH, and you had Kyle Schwarber, and Kyle Schwarber's not Ohtani, but you've already got money committed to a guy who had hit 40 bombs the past 2 seasons going into this past year and stuff like that. It just didn't make as much sense as the Juan Soto thing. The Soto thing makes absolute sense. So That's part of the reason why it's a realistic goal for the fan base. But is it a realistic goal for the Phillies and the fan base when you look at what Juan Soto wants to do? Now, he wants to compete for a championship. That is a box absolutely checked in the Philadelphia Phillies' favor. They're a championship contention team. Juan Soto is not going to go to like the Minnesota Twins and just spend time up there barely making or barely missing the playoffs. He's just not. He's going to go to a team that he believes that he can win a World Series with, because he does not have enough of that hardware yet in his mind. He believes that he could be a all-time great, and part of being an all-time great is going to a team that's going to help him be in the Fall Classic year in and year out, or more often than not, or often enough. And that's something that's going to require a team like the Phillies, like the Yankees, like, I hate to say it, but where the Mets are at right now, like the Dodgers, maybe like the Padres that you look at. Maybe if you look at the American League, I'm thinking of other teams. Baltimore, but Baltimore probably doesn't have the payroll. Like, there needs to be the perfect storm of teams that come together for Juan Soto to choose your organization. Now, let's talk payroll-wise. Is it realistic to drop a $700 million contract? It doesn't feel all that realistic for the Philadelphia Phillies, right? But the Mets have a higher payroll than the Phillies right now, paying off that Verlander and Scherzer contract situation up there. And a lot of people believe the Mets are fully in on Juan Soto, and they should be. As I told you, every team in baseball should be. So if it's realistic for them, the only thing stopping the Phillies would be John Middleton. Now, if the Phillies had gone to the NLCS and they had lost to the Dodgers in like 7 games, I would think it's less realistic that they go after Juan Soto with a competitive offer, because John Middleton can convince himself when he's lying awake at night, yeah, I mean, we're close though. We don't need Soto. I don't need to spend $700 million of my own money anymore on that. Like, we're close. We can get this done without that major investment. And every investment has some risk, even a Juan Soto investment that seems to be 99.9% positive. So the fact that they went out the way they did to a team that may acquire Soto, or will definitely be interested at least, that should highly motivate the Philadelphia Phillies to do it. I mean, there's no reason why they should not get the support from ownership. And it sounds like John Middleton, he's interested in getting Juan Soto, or he's interested in making a splash move, and he would be the biggest splash move. So with that in mind, yeah, it's realistic based on the team you are and how much you're willing to pay. Now, there's some other teams that you're looking at that are kind of like weirder teams that could be in the mix. And this is why, is it realistic, becomes a prudent question, because the Toronto Blue Jays have been mentioned. Remember, the Blue Jays are a team that strongly went after Shohei Ohtani. We had that whole debacle where people were talking about Ohtani's on a plane to Toronto right now. He's willing to sign. Yeah, that didn't work out exactly. Ends up with the Dodgers. But the Dodgers are figuring to have interest as well. I mean, they're an unbelievable team. Who says they won't spend and build after the World Series? That would be unfair, but it would be possible. The Chicago Cubs and the San Francisco Giants are both major market teams. San Francisco, you might not say they don't feel like a major market team right now, but they could go ahead and throw all their money at Shohei Ohtani. The Cubs could go ahead and throw all their money at Shohei Ohtani. The Washington Nationals are rumored to be interested in reacquiring Juan Soto, but I don't believe that's realistic. I don't believe the Cubs are realistic, and I don't believe the Giants are realistic. Like, I believe they're lower down in the standings. If I had to give you my guess, the most likely teams, I would say the Yankees are 1, because, come on, he's already there. The Mets are probably 2. I'll put the Blue Jays at 3. I'll put the Phillies at 4. I'll put the Dodgers at 5, and then it's Cubs, Giants, and Nationals. Actually, I'd go Giants, Cubs, Nationals in that order, as far as where I would rank the likelihood that those teams end up acquiring him. But, I mean, the Yankees mortgage their future to get him. Here's where this gets, here's where the realism, right, from a lot of ways it looks like it could realistically happen. Here's the pitfall of potentially acquiring Juan Soto, or him even really becoming truly and utterly available. The Yankees traded for him. They saw him. They know how he fits in that clubhouse and with that locker room and in that lineup, and how good he can be, and that they can go to the World Series, and that they can get really close with Juan Soto, and they believe they can win one with Juan Soto. And if you had that player, how would you ever let him out of the organization? up in the Bronx, up in New York, that franchise with that money associated with the biggest brand in baseball, and they are the biggest brand in baseball. They're one of the biggest brands in sports. They're going to most likely, I would guess, end up with Juan Soto again. Like they just are. Like, how could you imagine if you were a fan of the Phillies and they had Juan Soto and they had that year and he had that year and you let him walk out of the building? And could you imagine if there was another team that played on the other side of Philadelphia that you hated that was in the mix to sign him and you let him go there? Like, they're not in the same league, the Mets and the Yankees, but you'd still have to hear about him all the time from opposing fans that live in your own city. I don't think he makes it out of New York. I don't think he leaves the Yankees. And if he does, I think it's likely he takes an offer with the Mets because he wants to stay in the same general area and makes it simpler for him, even though with $700 million, you can move wherever. That's where it's the realisticness of Soto coming to the Phillies. I would say it's 35% chance maybe, right? And that's more realistic than a lot of teams. But it's not like, oh, it's a lock that he comes in. 30%, 35% chance. It's not impossible. I might even go lower, 25% chance. Like, I'm slowly talking myself more and more out of it because just how competitive it's going to be. So that's the situation with Juan Soto. He's the perfect player at the perfect time, at the perfect position for the Phillies. It's going to cost a boatload of money, and it is realistic that they could potentially sign him. But there are some hurdles in the way. And at the end of the day, it's going to be tough for them to get that done. And there's no internal issues with him coming here. There's no locker room worries. There's no reason they can't meet that payroll requirement. John Middleton has the money. It's just, can they make a more competitive offer based on everything that surrounds it and monetarily to the Yankees and the Mets up there in New York? And I think it's more likely than not the Phillies don't, but it's certainly possible that they could. I know I sound wishy-washy. Well, that's because nobody knows what's going to happen. Coming up next, we know what did happen for Zack Wheeler's 2024 season, and we're going to evaluate that really quickly since I promised you an evaluation, and he's super easy to talk about, and he deserves more love than this. But honestly, there's only so much you could say about how good he was. We'll talk about it coming up as we wrap up today's episode. All right, let's talk about HIMSHims, though, because, guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. HIMSHims provides access to treatments that can help you stay hard and last longer, giving you that boost of confidence so that you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Every time I read that intro to this ad read, I get uncomfortable. Stay hard, last longer. This is stuff you don't want to talk about with strangers or even a doctor or family members, friends, any of this stuff. You keep this to yourself, right? It's a private thing, your sexual health. Well, that's why HIMSHims is perfect. HIMSHims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. HIMSHims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need to talk about harder or longer or any of that uncomfortable stuff with the doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed. One low price covers everything from treatment to ongoing care. They got hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, so they can absolutely help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. Again, it's hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Go ahead and check out our friends over at HIMSHims. I also want to tell you about our friends over at Arena Club. Arena Club is absolutely awesome. If you are a collector, I mean, for most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on something like a Luka Doncic card or an Ellie De La Cruz card or a Patrick Mahomes card, like those rookie cards, it just isn't in the cards for you. But I love collecting, and a lot of people out there do as well. Maybe you're a big-time collector. Well, if you are, I know that's some serious money to drop. But thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all the possible cards that you could get, and clear hit rates for each one, so you know what your chances are. It's not just a guess. It's, hey, an actual percentage chance, like we talked about with Juan Soto in free agency. Might not get it, but you know what your chances are. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent with a full grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb, code LOCKEDONMLB for 10% off your first purchase with Arena Club. All right, just a quick short evaluation of Zack Wheeler in 2024 for the Philadelphia Phillies. And there's no secret to this one. Zack Wheeler had an unbelievable year. This was his best year as a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. This was the best year of his career. He was unbelievable. He had a 6.1 WAR, 16-7 record, 2.57 ERA. He was outstanding for the Phillies in this season. And I mean, he's just, at 34 years of age, he's aging like a fine wine. As far as strikeouts, he had 224. That's the second highest mark in his career. You might say his overall numbers, you look at 2021 when he was an all-star with the Philadelphia Phillies and had like 247 strikeouts, which led baseball, and 213 and a third innings, which led all of the majors. You might say that was the better year. 3 complete games that year, 2 shutouts. You believe it or not, you know it's crazy. Zack Wheeler had no complete games and no shutouts this year. That might be crazy. So you look at 2021, but the ERA is still, in 2021, he posted an ERA of 2.78. This year, lowered that even more to 2.57, the lowest mark of his career. Let's look at the whip. I mean, that's just a full – I love the whip because walks and hits and innings pitch is basically how much trouble are you in as a pitcher. 0.955, best in the National League. Unbelievable. Lower than a 1. He averaged less than a base runner an inning. That's all you need to know. He's unbelievable. He signed the extension this past offseason going into this season, and he rewarded the Phillies with a absolutely amazing year. Of all the players on the Philadelphia Phillies this past year, Zack Wheeler was the best. Position player, pitcher, bullpen, starter, anything. The best player on this team, including Bryce Harper, was Zack Wheeler in 2024. So how am I supposed to not give him an A+ for his 2024 season? He's in the Cy Young conversation. Now, he's not going to win it. It's going to go to Chris Sale. I get it. Chris Sale had an unbelievable year for the Atlanta Braves. He's fully deserving. We had conversation about, can Zack Wheeler potentially steal the Cy Young away from Chris Sale, because it would be stealing it from Chris Sale with the type of year that guy had down there in Atlanta. But the fact that he's even in conversation with Chris Sale after the year that Sale put together shows you that Zack Wheeler had a darn good year too. And Phillies fans should feel really good about the contract that Zack Wheeler signed this past year, or rather the extension on the existing contract that he signed this past offseason, because he was as advertised. So A++ for Zack Wheeler in 2024 as a grade for the Philadelphia Phillies compared to expectations. Compared to his peers around baseball and other starting pitchers, A++ as well. There was an argument that Zack Wheeler was the guy that you did not want to face this year. Of all the guys, Paul Skeens, Tariq Skubal, Chris Sale, take any pitcher that you want to put out there and say, match him up with Zack Wheeler. You could argue Wheeler's going out and winning that game. And he was great in the postseason. Now, he only got 1 start, but he did everything he could. And it was a shame the Phillies didn't win that opening game against the New York Mets. And that's on the bullpen, and that's a travesty. But again, no fault of Wheeler. It was one of the great postseason performances we've seen since, well, really, Roy Halladay's no-hitter against the Cincinnati Reds back in, 2010? Yeah, so Zack Wheeler, A+ compared to expectations, A+ compared to his peers, A+ because I just love him so much, and every Phillies fan should feel very lucky that Zack Wheeler is on this baseball team. So that's why there was only so much you needed to evaluate with Zack Wheeler before I gave him the A+ and talked about how good he can be. I think he can be just as good as in 2025. He's shown no signs of slowing down. He is this team's ace. He is the lead guy in that rotation. And if you have Zack Wheeler, you got a chance, right? If you make it to the postseason, you're going to throw that guy game one, you're going to be a tough out. So great season by Zack Wheeler. No other way to look at it. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us and checking us out today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube. All that great stuff that really helps us out on Locked On Phillies. That's really all that I got for you. So tomorrow we're going to go back to our evaluations because we've covered all the big news and the Soto episode. So you got your fix there. That's what we've got for today's episode. Tomorrow, well, I guess we'll go evaluate Aaron Nola, shall we? We'll talk about it on the next episode. I'll talk to you then.